What's up, guys? Today, I'm going to take you through the top 5 most confusing pickleball rules that I see a lot of players getting wrong. I remember when I was getting started, some of these were really hard to grasp. By the end of this video, I promise you will fully understand them all. So let's get started. To start, I want to go through the 5 main rules that I see players having trouble with. After that, I'm going to take you through 8 rapid-fire bonus rules that you can take advantage of. So make sure to stay tuned if you want to see that. Helping me today, I have my sister, Kimmy. So the first rule that I want to cover is when you can call the ball out. This definitely causes the most controversy on the courts because a lot of the time you'll call the ball out and your opponents either don't agree with you, they didn't see it, etc. So one thing I want you to keep in mind though is that a lot of these rules will be a refresher or review for you if you already know the rules, but you need to make sure that you understand them fully so that if you're on the courts, you can be confident in telling your opponents what the rules are, right? So in terms of calling the ball out, the rule states that in order to call the ball out, you need to see a space between the ball and the line. So from this angle, you can clearly see a space between the ball and the line, right? Where it gets tricky though, is if the ball is starting to get really close to the line. So there, because you're viewing it from an outside angle, it might not look like there's a space between the ball and the line, but it's still out because what makes a ball out is just the point of the ball of where it touches. So if the ball is touching the green on this court, right, and it's not touching the white line at all, it's out. But from a visual perspective, it can get a little confusing because of what I just said. Sometimes when you're on the baseline and you're looking down at a ball that's landing on the baseline, it can be tricky to call the ball out. So what I like to do, if you can't fully see a space between the ball and the line, the rule I like to follow is only call the ball out if you're 100% sure that it's out. If you're only 70% sure, just give your opponents the benefit of the doubt. It'll keep the vibes good on the court, and it'll prevent your opponents from thinking that you're cheating them. So if your opponent hits the ball out, you don't want to call it while it's still in the air like this, out, because there's always a chance it might actually land in. So you don't want to call it after it bounces for too long either. You want to try to call the ball out the second that it bounces, audibly and visually. So what that means is if the ball lands out, right when it lands, I'm going to say out, and I'm going to do this with my finger. This is the universal symbol for an out ball in any racket sport. So I say out, and I point my finger up. That way my opponent knows that I called the ball out and they can either agree with me or disagree with me. Taking this rule into account, there's actually one specific time in pickleball where the line is out. It's actually the kitchen line, which I'm going to go over. Before that though, I want to tell you about a new paddle, the Sweet Spot Pro. The thing you need to understand about most paddles, especially cheap ones, is they have big dead zones or the areas on the sides of the paddle where the ball dies off of. Having a paddle like this just makes things harder on you as a new player. On this paddle though, we used a special weight and density layout to make the sweet spot as big as possible. And if you didn't know, the sweet spot's the area in the center of the paddle that you want to try to hit every single time where you'll get a good reaction from the ball. So when you try this paddle, it'll just make it feel like all your shots are easier to stay consistent with. And this is especially the case if the paddle you're using right now costs less than $100. So if you're looking for a paddle upgrade, make sure to go to our site and check ours out. If you use code RULES, you can get $20 off. With this discount, our paddle is definitely the best value on the market. You don't need to spend $250 anymore to get a good paddle. The next rule I want to go over though that a lot of players don't know, and I actually didn't know it for a long time after I started, is that when you hit the serve in pickleball, the kitchen line is out. So you might have known that the kitchen is out on a serve, but if the ball is to land on the kitchen line, it's also out. So it can be confusing because in tennis or other racket sports, the lines are pretty much never out. But what you need to know is that if your opponent hits a serve and it lands on the kitchen line, you will call it by saying short because it's landing short from the kitchen box, and that will count as a missed serve. So it might be tough to tell because it's a little bit weird calling the ball out when it's hitting the line, and when you're back returning from the baseline, it may be a little challenging to tell if there's any space, but just like our other calls, only call it short if you're 100% sure. That way your opponents won't think you're cheating them. This is a little bit of a challenging call to make, so be a little careful here. The next rule I want to cover though is one of the most broken by far, and it's what height you can make contact with your volley serve. So hit a serve, Kimmy. You'll see that serve was highly illegal. As the rule states on a volley serve, you need to make contact with the ball below your waist. So if we imagine a red line right here, Kimmy needs to make contact with the ball below that line. So if she's hitting the ball up here on a volley serve, that is not legal. So make sure when you're tossing the ball, if you do a volley serve, you're hitting it below your waist, or else you're just getting a big advantage because you're able to hit it down over the net. This is a big thing with pros. There's a lot of issues with pros serving too high, and it makes it just really easy to hit your serve super hard. But don't worry, if you're hitting your serve below your waist, you can still go super hard as long as you're using topspin. I have a bunch of videos on serve if you want to go deeper into that. But just know, contact below the waist and you're serving fair. And just to specify, a volley serve is where I hit it out of the air as opposed to a drop serve or a bounce serve where I drop it like that. On a bounce serve, this rule does not apply. You can just hit the ball at whatever height it bounces to. So you don't need to worry about it if you're doing the bounce serve. The next rules I want to go over, though, are very commonly broken as well, and they're the kitchen rules. So the basic kitchen rules that most people understand is that you can't volley in the kitchen. So I can't hit the ball out of the air if I'm standing in this area, right? Where I see a lot of players messing up, though, is that you can't volley from behind the kitchen and fall into the kitchen within that motion. So what that looks like, we'll see Kimmy doing it, is that. So she hit the volley with both feet behind the kitchen line, but her momentum carried her into the kitchen. So you're not allowed to do that. You need to hit the volley from behind the kitchen and stay behind the kitchen. So one thing to keep in mind, though, is you can totally go in the kitchen at any point during a rally, and it's totally legal. You just can't hit the ball out of the air. So if Kimmy wants to hit a dink from in the kitchen, she can totally step inside the kitchen to hit the dink. That's totally fine. What you need to do, though, if you want to volley, is become situated with 2 feet behind the kitchen before doing so. So if Kimmy's going to hit a volley, she just needs to make sure she's got both feet out of the kitchen, and she's totally allowed to do so. So one cool way you can take advantage of this is you can actually do an Ernie by running through the kitchen, and you can hit the ball as long as your feet are situated outside. So this is a little challenging to do, but technically this would be legal. I got both my feet situated outside of the kitchen right before, so the shot counts. And guys, keep in mind, I'm not going to go through all the rules in this video. So if you have any rules-related questions, drop them in the comments, and either me or another player will help you figure it out. One really important rule, though, that I want to cover, and I see so many people getting wrong, is in regards to scoring, and it's the third number. So as you probably know, when you call the score in pickleball, you say 3 numbers. The first 2 are just the score, so if it's 1-all, you say 1-1. But the third number represents how many serves your team has left. So a lot of people get confused with this number, but you always call either a 1 or a 2. And if you already play, you probably know that the very first score you call in pickleball is 0-0-2, because neither team has any points, but you might be confused why you call 2 first. So the reason for that is the team that starts serving in pickleball only gets 1 player to serve before it switches over. And when it switches over, it's called a side out. So if I'm the team that's serving first in the game, I'm going to call 0-0-2. If I lose that point, it switches to the other team, so it's a side out. After that, it's always going to be for the rest of the game to 11 that both players get the opportunity to serve until they lose. So after that first side out, the person that gets the ball first on the other side will always call a 1 first as a third number, and they'll start from the right side. So when we get the ball back, I'm going to say, let's say no one scored a point, I'm going to say 0-0-1. If I lose this point, Kimmy's going to serve, and she's going to say 0-0-2. If you have any questions on that scoring rule, drop them in the comments, and someone will try to help you. Now, guys, I'm going to get into our 8 rapid-fire tips that you can use to your advantage. But before I get into that, if you're liking this video so far, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Now, though, let's get started. The first one's kind of funny, and it's if the ball hits your hand, as long as it's below your wrist, if it goes in, so that one hit my fist, if it goes in, it counts. So you can actually hit the ball off of your hand, and it still counts. The next rule is that if your ball ever bounces back on your side from your opponent's side like this, you win the point. So it looks kind of weird because it bounced back on my side, but if your opponent doesn't hit the ball, you win the point. But in this situation, your opponent's actually allowed to reach over the net to hit the ball. So you got to be careful here. Doesn't happen very often, but now you know. The next rule is that if the ball ever falls over the net and hits the metal beam, a lot of nets have metal beams, or it rolls off the net, you redo the point. So it has to hit on the other side of the net, but a lot of the time you see the metal beam one. If it hits the metal beam, you just replay the point. If it hits the metal beam on your own side, you lose the point. So it needs to go over for this to happen, but just know that's a replay. The next rule is that you're allowed to spin your serve if you use your paddle exclusively to get the spin. You can't pre-spin the ball with your hand. So there I pre-spun the ball by spinning it with my hand. You're not allowed to do that, whether it be with 2 hands, with the paddle. You can only spin the ball when you hit it with the paddle. And if you want to learn how to do that, I have a full video on that. The next two rules are that if you accidentally double hit a ball like that, that's actually legal. But if you ever carry the ball, that is illegal. So a double hit is if the ball hits your paddle twice. A carry is if the ball rests on your paddle for a period of time. Double hits are always legal. Carries are always illegal. The next rule is that if the ball hits the net on your serve and it goes in, you play these as good. So in tennis, this would be called a let, and you replay them in tennis. In pickleball, you usually don't replay them. So you play them as good unless specified. So in some tournaments or leagues, they replay lets. So let is when it hits net on a serve specifically. So normally the default rule is to play lets as good, but keep in mind, if the ball falls in the kitchen or hits the kitchen line, remember, it's out. So you have to be aware of that. And the next rule I want to cover is that in order for your paddle to be considered legal, it needs to be USAPA approved, which if it is, it'll have a little seal right here. So make sure to check your paddle for this seal. Guys, as I mentioned earlier, if you're looking to upgrade your paddle, highly recommend going to our site, checking out our paddle, and using code RULES for $20 off at checkout if you're interested in purchasing it. It's really just a great paddle for people getting into the game. The bigger sweet spot just makes everything feel easier and it makes you more consistent. So if you're interested, go check that out. But if you want to keep watching videos about pickleball, this next video goes through how to hit spin serves, which you can use to your advantage against your opponents.